Welcome back to our micro-learning course about checklists in general aviation. The course consists of 3 short modules. Hopefully, you have already completed Module 1 on checklist basics. This is Module 2, which deals with the effective use of checklists and such things as which checklists are needed and what to do if you are interrupted while running a checklist. Module 3 concerns modifying or creating checklists to make them right for the individual and for the operation. It is not essential, but I recommend that you view the modules in sequence. So let's talk about the effective use of checklists. Checklists aren't thought about very much. They're just something that is there. Most pilots use what is available, at least until they get airborne, and then sometimes completely forget about checklists. But bring up the subject of checklists and pilots tend to get riled up. Some pilots will say that they don't need checklists and will offer numerous reasons why they don't use them. Others will argue that checklists should be used for everything that is done in an airplane. But most pilots agree that checklists are necessary. But what form they should take, as well as when and how they should be used, becomes a source of controversy. What is a checklist? Checklists can take many forms: read do and do confirm. Glass cockpit, business, and air carrier airplanes are now using electronic checklists. These are also beginning to find their way into smaller general aviation airplanes. Several airlines are using checklists on iPads with FAA approval. And many GA pilots are now using checklists on iPads as well. In smaller and/or older general aviation airplanes, we typically use some form of paper checklists. And it's not just about safety. There are efficiency benefits to following checklists also. I know of a pilot who was a commercial, CFI, and designated pilot examiner who flew a Piper Arrow on a personal cross-country flight of just over 1 hour, but forgot to retract the landing gear for the entire flight. He discovered his oversight when he entered the traffic pattern and went to extend the gear and found that it was already down. The extra drag cost him some speed, which resulted in using more fuel than needed. And there have been flights in which the pilot took off and noticed on climb out that the airspeed indicator wasn't working. A return to the airport was made, and the culprit was found to be the pitot tube cover still in place. A pre-flight checklist would have saved a considerable amount of time and fuel. So what does a checklist do? It provides a step-by-step plan for performing important tasks. It helps to avoid errors caused by forgetting to perform important functions, and helps to prevent accidents and save lives. Checklist use can also improve efficiency. So let's take a look at how I recommend general aviation pilots use checklists. In the next module, we'll see how to create these checklists if we do not already have them. Here is a list of what I call normal operations. A separate checklist can be produced for each of these phases. Now, the checklist might be only 1 or 2 items in some cases, and multiple checklists might be printed on the same page. For example, in a simple single-engine airplane such as a Cessna 172 with a normally aspirated carbureted engine and a fixed-pitch propeller, the climb checklist might be as simple as stating the desired climb speed, verifying full power, verifying flaps retracted, and setting the trim for climb. If you're flying a Cub or something similar, you might only have to verify full power and set the trim. Or you might skip the climb checklist altogether. Of course, all of the checklists will be more lengthy and would grow with the airplane complexity. We can add to manufacturers' lists, but we don't delete anything. The emergency checklist may have some items such as fire or smoke that need to be memorized. In the airline, we call those memory items. But once initial immediate action is taken, there may be a written checklist to run. For example, there will be some immediate memory tasks in the event of an engine failure, such as pitch for a particular airspeed and select a landing site. But, time permitting, we can use a checklist to remind us to apply carburetor heat, verify fuel selector and mixture settings, and so on in an attempt to restart. Many general aviation airplanes don't have a checklist for abnormal procedures, but they should. Abnormal operations deal with situations that aren't emergencies, yet, but that can become emergencies if not handled properly. Here is a list of some abnormal situations. It is very helpful to have thought out the problem before it occurs and have a plan to deal with it. Creating an abnormal procedures checklist also serves as a good learning exercise in better understanding the airplane's systems. It is not uncommon for the execution of the checklist to be interrupted by a radio call or by something else. Whenever the checklist is interrupted, it is important to avoid inadvertently skipping an item. The recommendation to avoid that is to go back 3 steps and resume from there. We must resolve to use our checklists on every flight, and not just get the engine started and do a run-up. We need to practice with our checklists until we are comfortable using them. Most pilots will choose the read-do kind of list. Perhaps if you have a reliable, frequent passenger, you might consider asking the passenger to read the lists. As we said, we also need to have a plan for when the checklist is interrupted. You have completed Module 2, Effective Use of Checklists. Hopefully, you have already completed Module 1 on Checklist Basics. Continue this microlearning series with Module 3, Modifying or Creating Checklists. If you have not completed Module 1, if you are ready for Module 3, links to all the modules plus more aviation safety videos can be found on genebenson.com.